For many of us, the first time we traveled internationally was to Western Europe, and yet many aspiring nomad capitalists have entirely crossed Western Europe off their list of potential places to move. Today I'm going to give you 6 reasons why you might want to put it back on your list. Indeed, for years, we've been telling you how the West is in decline. Countries like the US and Canada and Australia have seen fewer freedoms. They've seen higher tax rates. Their economies, their freedom of speech, their corruption, all going in the wrong direction. The culture is going in the wrong direction. And many people have basically lumped in every Western country along with that. No doubt the European Union has restrictions, regulations. They have seen some of their freedoms taken away. Countries like the UK left entirely with voters supporting the very premise we'd be better off on our own. And yet, is the UK particularly any freer in ways that may matter to you on a day-to-day basis? Today I want to talk about that. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consultancy for 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to legally reduce their taxes, protect their assets, and increase their options overseas with things like second citizenships. I'm also the host of the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. I think one of the reasons, number one, to consider Western Europe is it is a wide selection of countries. You have some that are no doubt going through some problems, where they are overregulated, where they are overtaxed, and where the population is very much in favor of that. You could make an argument for Scandinavia and say, hey, listen, people generally speaking like the idea of not having financial transparency and paying taxes to support general welfare. And everything's taken care of them. You could also argue that those economies, while they are technically more free on different reports than the United States' economy, hey, they're not great places to go and start a business. And you get to make a decision. Now, for the people we're talking to, living in Norway probably isn't that interesting. But that is not all of the West. You could certainly make arguments that Norway is one of the least corrupt countries in the world, that it's very transparent, that they've done a good job of managing all that money they take in through their sovereign wealth fund for their citizens. Just as people often refer to Africa as a country rather than a continent that has well over 50 countries in it, I think that people overlook the fact that there are some hidden gems in Western Europe where they are trying to move in the right direction. They may be part of the European Union. You're not going to get the maximum freedom you could get anywhere in the world, but here's why I mention this. We work with a lot of Westerners here on a daily basis, and we've seen more Americans, more Canadians, more Australians who are just tired of the direction that their country isn't going. I think that the idea of Western Europe to them may be appealing in the sense of it gives you some of what you would like to have in a country. It certainly has its share of downsides, but it may be the kind of safety blanket move that gets you out of your country by saying, here's something that is similar enough. Here's a brand name that I know where I can still make some improvements, which is what I'm going to cover in these 6 reasons. And so therefore, it could be called the training wheels, called the baby steps. Maybe it's the final place where you can go. All of us have different desires, whether it's tax, freedom, and lifestyle. You can evaluate which one of those 3 or how those 3 are important to you. But I think that despite the fact that the problems in Europe are regulations, taxes, restrictions, to some extent culture, there are some potentially ways you can get around that. And so number one reason to consider Western Europe is we're not talking about France. We're not talking about, Norway, for example. We can acknowledge those countries may have some utility to some people. They may have some benefits for certain kind of people, but probably not for a 7- or 8-figure entrepreneur. But you have some standouts where countries like Portugal, for example, is the government really that right-wing? No, but they realize we're a small country. And unlike Spain next door, we don't have the same brand name. We don't have the same population size. We don't have the same tourism. We need to do things to bring people into the joint. How are we going to get people in? And to me, is that the perfect approach? No. But it's a better approach than a country like a US where Gavin Newsom says, where are you going to go? Where are we going to go? There's 252 countries and territories around the world. There's a lot of places to go, Gavin. And so if you're in a place, perhaps for some folks making an incrementally better move with a more familiar lifestyle is a good thing. So, number 2. There are countries in Western Europe that do have low taxes. Not necessarily headline tax rates that are low, but tax rates that are low for foreigners, or exemptions, or non-dom programs, or certain ways that you can reduce your taxes, in many cases down into the single-digit percentages if you are a 7- or 8-figure entrepreneur or investor. And so for some people, Western European countries with their network of tax treaties and just the optics of living in Europe, that may benefit certain people. There are certain people who come to us and say, I want to live in a country that I'm proud to tell my customers and my clients about, because if I say, hey, I'm packing up and moving to Panama, they're going to be a little bit weirded out. And so you can get low tax rates in countries like Portugal or Italy or Greece or Switzerland or Ireland or the UK that have certain tax incentive programs. Spain is a tax incentive program. I wouldn't really give much thought to that. But you have a number of countries in Europe that have these incentives. And so those incentives might last for 10 or 15 years. They might apply to the money that you bring into the country. They might apply to certain types of income. You could potentially get your tax rate low. You could add Malta to that list. You could add Cyprus to that list. You've got a good number of countries, whether you want to live on a small island as like Malta and Cyprus, whether you want to live on a bigger island like Ireland, whether you want English speaking, whether you want warm weather. I mean, you've got a broad diversity. Generally speaking, Southern Europe has had more incentives because their economies are generally less developed. And so you're not going to get nearly as many deals in a country like Germany. They don't really need to be giving out deals. But give some credit. Listen, would I buy property in Spain? I would not. Would I buy property in Greece or Italy? I've said that I wouldn't do that. I guess I'd really have to make it be a lifestyle purchase and just really love living there for me to do it and not worry about the financial implications. But no, as of right now, I would not buy property in those countries. But the idea that Italy says, listen, our country financially is not doing that well. We've got some problems. So rather than beating up people, there is some beating up of locals more on the tax rates, but you know what? In addition, let's bring some foreigners in. Let's copy what Switzerland's done next door. They've got kind of the creme de la creme of tax exemptions, which is going to cost you, if you're not an EU citizen, it's going to cost you a pretty penny to get into Switzerland. But hey, Italy says, let's copy that system. And then Greece says, let's copy Italy's system. And let's make it to where you can pay one flat amount. There are other territories like Gibraltar and like Jersey where you can go and you can also pay a flat amount, and sometimes you can pay zero. So depending on what kind of place you want to live in, you can get low taxes. And I think what people do is they sometimes write off Europe thinking, oh, look at those crazy high tax rates. If you live in, fill in the blank country, it's 37%. That's crazy. I might as well stay in the US. Well, all the aforementioned places will offer certain exemptions. Some are better for cryptocurrency, some are better for businesses. You're going to have to go through more broad structuring. It's not going to be as simple as just moving to Monaco. Obviously, Monaco is also in Western Europe. You can use that, but it's not going to be as easy as moving to Panama, for example. But if you go through the proper structuring, you can get low taxes, potentially lower than you could in other places. Again, the treaties or the optics or other reasons might help certain types of businesses, but low taxes shouldn't stop you from going to Western Europe. The third reason to consider Western Europe is you can work towards citizenship, and citizenship with benefits. So if you're actually going to live somewhere, all things being equal, you would want to live in a place where you can get citizenship. Now, some people like living in Dubai. That's the lifestyle they want. They like that it's just clean, easy, zero tax. You don't need to be doing transfer pricing studies. You don't need to be figuring out, if you're running 3% of the business, how much do we bring in? We set up a local company. That's some of the stuff you might be doing in Europe. You might be doing kind of, management in different countries. I mean, there's a lot of different things you might be doing in Europe. It's going to cost you a bit more to get those low taxes. In some cases, depending on what your income is, the bigger your business, the more it would cost. Obviously, in Dubai, you don't have that. On the other hand, what you don't get in the UAE is you're not generally working towards citizenship. Yes, the UAE is starting to open up citizenship, but it's not on conditions that most Westerners would want. And quite frankly, anyone with money, you probably would rather have a couple different citizenships than be a citizen only of the UAE. And so, hey, if you want to live in Nicaragua, as some wealthy folks that we're working with have decided to live in, or you want to live in Colombia, or you want to live in Uruguay, or you want to live in Mexico, I mean, those places will all give you citizenship. And hey, Mexican citizenship is pretty good. Uruguay citizenship is pretty good. You can get decent passports in Latin America. But here's what you don't get. You don't get access to live, work, study everywhere in Europe. And you don't get access, generally speaking, back to the United States if you're a US citizen. And so the idea of having a Western European EU citizenship means once you have that, you got, not even by investing, you can go and get Malta citizenship. They have a program that works in 18 months, and we've been working with a number of folks to do that. But if you say, I'm going to live somewhere else anyway, why not work your way towards Irish citizenship or Portuguese citizenship? Italian's going to be a little bit harder. Greece, I think, is less likely to naturalize people. Switzerland is a pretty tough one to get. So some of these countries are better than others. And by the way, Ireland is going to want you to live there longer every year than Portugal is. right? And so you get to decide. Some of the countries, if you get citizenship in the future, that might make the tax benefits more difficult to manage. And so if you decide you like it there, maybe you don't want to get the citizenship. So that needs to be factored in. This is why we create holistic plans here, is, what happens in 5 years when you get the Cypriot citizenship, right? How is that going to impact your tax status? And so if the citizenship and the tax status is important, maybe you want to look at somewhere else, or maybe you want to have a different strategy. But the bottom line is you can be working towards a high-quality citizenship. If you are a Westerner and you're thinking one day you're not going to want your other citizenship, is EU citizenship that diversified versus the US or Canada? No, but the US already has citizenship-based taxation and all kinds of regulations on its citizens. Canada's been talking about that. I certainly think there's some risk of the EU doing that, although whenever something sprouts up, I have recently seen a couple of examples of that kind of fading away. It certainly is a possibility. But if I had to choose, and if it was my priority to say, listen, if one day I'm not Canadian, I at least want a way to go back and visit. Well, Western European citizenship makes that easier. So you have to make a choice. Sometimes people hear me saying like, oh, the EU's going in this direction. Well, why is he saying to go to the EU now? Because I'm saying, and I'm trying to accept the fact that some people prioritize, they will accept the low risk that maybe Portugal decides to be a little bit less flexible on taxes for its citizens in the future. In exchange, they'll take that risk in exchange for, I don't want to be an American in 6 years. And so I want a passport that I can earn that allows me to go back. Some people don't like the idea of Malta. They figure, oh, everyone knows what Malta is. I don't necessarily argue with that. I also don't necessarily know that it matters, but if that's what you feel, then it's my job to serve you to find the passport that you're comfortable having. I think Malta has a great program for someone who wants all these benefits of Western Europe without the obligation of living there. That's going to come at a cost. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, then why not go and spend your time in one of these countries? So citizenship with benefits, and once you have an EU citizenship, if you become Portuguese, you can decide, I'm going to go and live in Ireland. If you become an Irish citizen, you can even live in the UK. And so you have the benefits not only of great travel, but the ability to live in different countries. And you know what that gives you if you're looking for freedom? I know some folks say the EU isn't as good for freedom. And obviously there are places that are more free, have fewer regulations, have fewer restrictions. I get it. But you know what? You have more than 24 countries. And so if you had EU citizenship and later you decided, oh my goodness, this is just too much, there may be a country in the EU like a Hungary or Poland, but they push back in the EU. There may be a country like Bulgaria, which has been, not open to foreigners, more open, I think, internally in the last couple of years. So you get to kind of pick and choose. Not all these countries are going the same direction. They're not all Belgium. Obviously, some of them are in that league, and you wouldn't want to go to those countries. But I think having optionality is not a bad thing to do. And for some folks who don't mind having a few more regulations, this could be a way to get there. The fourth thing is you have a great lifestyle for many folks. Now, I get it. I've been very adventurous over the years. I'm getting to the point in my life now where I'm saying I want a little bit less Laos and a little bit more Lausanne. I want a bit more of the culture. I want a bit more of the services. For some people, it's weather, right? And so there's plenty of good weather in Latin America. There's plenty of good weather in Southeast Asia. I would argue that there's some people who want cold weather, and so obviously in Europe you've got a lot of optionality, and you could live in one and you could spend time in the other with the same residence permit. But the lifestyle obviously is there. And for folks who are 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, listen, some of them, many of you, you don't want to be in Panama. You don't want to be in places in Latin America. There's not enough culture for you in Southeast Asia. Now, some people say, I don't care about that stuff. I want to be outdoors. Some people say, hey, Mexico City, very cultural city, amazing city, great restaurants, great everything. So I wouldn't cross all the other places off your list. I still believe in a lot of the up-and-coming places that we talk about. And I would go there and check those places out before you just simply say, oh, Italy's the only place with culture or Portugal's the only place with good lifestyle. That's not true. But I think that if the lifestyle is more similar to what you're used to, that might be at least a baby step. Maybe you go and pay a little bit of tax with a little bit of complication for 5 years, for example. You get your lifestyle in, you deal with some regulations, and then you get your citizenship, and then you make a decision. Do I want to live somewhere else in Europe, or do I want to go somewhere else? And now you have the optionality that if you don't trust the US, you don't trust Canada, you don't trust Australia, hey, you have an equal quality or even better passport. So there's different ways to approach this, but the lifestyle definitely, there's something for everyone in Europe, even if it does come with potentially higher prices and a few more restrictions. Number 5 is consumer convenience. This has been on my mind since we've had a lot of Canadians and Australians, as well as some Americans, who are really frustrated with the direction their country is going. They weren't thinking about doing this a couple years ago, and now they're looking. Now, what I've always told you, because I do believe in the up-and-coming countries we talk about, Eastern Europe, Latin America, Southeast Asia, even parts of East Asia, I do believe that there is value in those places, and that you don't want to overlook them, and that the reason many Westerners just disregard the idea of go where you're treated best is because they think, oh, this Georgia seems like a mess, and they kind of make up stories about Mexico, and oh, what about Thailand? I still believe that those places are good to go to, but I also know this. Some people are just not going to move to Georgia, no matter how nice it sounds and how much I tell you about it. They're not going to go there because there's just something holding them back. And sometimes that thing holding them back is they're used to Amazon Prime. They want things delivered next day. They want, meal prep delivered. Now, I would argue, you know what? I've adapted my lifestyle. I don't have Alexa spying on me. I go to the mall and buy stuff. I don't buy a lot of stuff online. I kind of enjoy a little bit of a more simple lifestyle, and I can afford to order stuff online. I can afford to have people bring this stuff to me, but sometimes it's just nice to have a bit of a simpler lifestyle. I kind of like that. But yet, if you're used to consumer conveniences and you want to ease into an offshore lifestyle, Western Europe is worth considering because they have that. They have Amazon. They have a lot of the stuff that you're used to. Now, again, the consumer conveniences are in parts of Latin America or Asia. I have a couple different properties where we go to renovate, and they're like, what do you want to do with the maid's room? I don't have a live-in maid. The idea always seemed kind of weird to me. And so, I'm like, all right, that's the storage room, or that's the room the cat will go when we adopt a cat or whatever. And, that's a different, culture, right? I mean, we know families in Colombia, they've had the same maid for 25 years. They're like part of the family. And so the maid is part of the consumer conveniences. You don't need meal prep delivered from some, service you found on YouTube. Lupita, is the meal prep service. And there's nothing wrong with that, but for many of us, we feel a little bit weird about having someone living in our house. So if you want the consumer conveniences, I remember talking to a friend of mine from Switzerland, an old client many years ago. I'm like, hey, how much could you live on in Switzerland? He was saying, maybe 120,000, francs a year. I said, would you have a maid for that amount? Maid? What maid? We don't have a maid. Obviously, people in Switzerland have maids, but the average person is not going to have a maid at the same extent someone in Malaysia would have a maid, or someone in Mexico would have a maid, where it's just much more affordable. So if you want those consumer conveniences, this could be a good place to go. And I would keep your mind open to being adaptive to other approaches, either the simpler life or hiring a staff or what have you. But again, soft landing could make Western Europe a place for you to go. The other thing is central location. Again, I'm talking to a lot of folks who never thought they'd be moving. Years ago, we worked with a lot of folks who they just wanted more of an adventure. It was all about lowering tax. They wanted an adventure. Those things are still very important. But now we're getting very serious entrepreneurs and investors. People who sometimes make tens of millions of dollars a year. Sometimes people who run billion-dollar companies. And they're like, you know what? Andrew, I love that you're Malaysia. I'm there with you, man. But I got to be able to get back to the HQ in a day. I got to be able to make phone calls. I don't want to stay up till 1 in the morning. I don't mind staying up till 1 in the morning, but I'm finding a lot of the people that are now coming in are like, I'm up at 5 in the morning. They're working early. And living in Asia, for example, doesn't work for them. And maybe living in South America isn't as safe as they would like, or doesn't offer as many benefits as they would like, or again, they want to work towards that good passport. They want their kids to go to a top school. That could be another reason. But the central location works to where folks from Africa, you can go back, South Africa, Belgrade, same time zone. So very similar time zone to Africa. 4, 5, 6 hours ahead of North America, as much as 7 or 8 hours to the West Coast. South America, it's pretty close. I mean, you're kind of right in the middle of everything. So you're never really doing these crazy hours in Europe. You might be a little bit earlier in the morning, you might be a little bit later in the afternoon, but you don't really need to be doing anything at 1 in the morning. And so it's easy to manage. A lot of people that we're working with have decentralized teams or teams in different parts of the world where there's some folks in the US, there's some folks in Germany, for example. Living in Europe, you are close to that. And you've got obviously a lot of travel options. Asia being slower to reopen has been a little bit more difficult. But certainly Asia, going back to North America, is a bit more frustrating. You've seen some reduced service in recent years, not even just in the last 2 years, so it's a little bit harder to get back there. Whereas Europe, you've got all kinds of different service. And so I think those are some reasons why you might want to consider Western Europe. I'm still a big believer in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia and Latin America, as I said. Not all those countries offer passports, and most of them don't offer the high-quality passports that Europe does for folks who really need that high-quality passport. You may not, but this is why at Nomad Capitalist we've got a service, and it involves, as our client, asking you hundreds of questions that we come up with based on what you tell us to figure out whether Western Europe is for you, which place in Western Europe would be the best place for you, or is there somewhere else? So for folks who are open to Europe, I think those are some reasons why you might want to continue, understanding that it's not for everyone.